This is the story of a man named Stanley.
I think there's a trend in terms of the type of people that we're talking to, or maybe John and I gravitate towards talking to people that are kind of doing this experimental narrative, subversive design, kind of like flipping everybody out on their head and saying, hey, what do you think of this?
Stanley stepped into the broom closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track.
So, I've spent a lot more time with this thing than most people have.
Yeah.
So my why is a lot further down the rabbit hole, so to speak, right? So, when I started designing it, the why was just at the level of the two doors, right? It was the narrator talking about the two doors and the player being there, and I just was trying to figure out why. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It didn't make sense. And I liked it because it didn't make sense.
Now, listen carefully. This is important. Stanley walked through the red door. Perhaps you misunderstood. Stanley walked through the red door. I still don't think we're communicating properly.
I liked it because it was inherently kind of contradictory and required, it required a depth of exploration that I didn't possess at that time. So I had to teach it to myself. I had to figure out how to make sense of this inherently nonsensical thing.
Yeah.
And the act and the practice of discovering that was itself the design process for Stanley Parable. And every time that I learned something new, it would go into the game, and then I would go a little bit deeper, and I'd have to ask myself, okay, now why?
Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life, for he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
When did you first open up Half-Life 2 mod or whatever, open the map editor, and when did you start working on the initial concept of the Stanley Parable? So
I opened up the map editor shortly after I played Dear Esther, the original mod, the original source mod, in 2008, I think.
Yeah.
So about a year later, I decided I want to start building a portfolio that I'll use to get hired by some company, right? So Stanley Parable was just going to be the first of several games that I wanted to make. And then it ended up taking 2 years. It ended up taking the rest of my college life, which I wasn't really expecting. But it also ended up doing a lot better than I expected.
Right.
Since I've completely forgotten what we were supposed to be doing, how about this? You win! Congratulations!
When you sit down to create something like this, you've got this idea in your head, and you know that what you're making is this thing of absolute purity, and that the right audience is going to see it, and they're going to connect with it, and they're going to get it, and they're going to know. And you're not even going to need to say anything. You're just going to be like, here it is, world, and they're going to pick it up and they're go, yes, I get it, right? And then that's it, and that's fuck the rest of them, right? That's the idea that you go into it with. And then over the course of development, actually making it kind of grounds you. It brings you back down. It humbles you. You see the nuts and bolts of it. You see all of its flaws and imperfections. You see, it's not like a magical, nebulous, ethereal thing to you anymore. So you don't really have as much of a grand, sweeping vision for how it's going to revolutionize the world, right?
Right.
It's really tough to feel that way after you've been working on something for 2 or 3 years. And then, with Stanley Parable, by the end of it, I was just sick of it, and I was like, no one's ever going to play this, so I just released it. And then suddenly people are coming back to me and describing it and having that experience with it in the way that I had imagined it from the very beginning, right? Where people were telling each other, just don't read anything about it, right? Just play it. You just need to...
Right.
You just need to... And this was, it's out of my hands at that point. I can't guide that narrative, People are picking it up and they're running with it on their own, and they're doing the work that I had imagined, but they're doing it on their own.
Oh, look at these two. How they wish to destroy one another. How they wish to control one another. How they both wish to be free.
That's what I love, right, is when I play something and I'm like, you made this for me. You know?
Yes, I know what you mean.
Right.